So,
Okay.
good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're logging in once again, because we have viewership overseas as well, as in Canada and US. So, my name is Bashir. I'm the president of BIZTEK, Business and Technology Professional Association of Canada. But as you have seen, as things we do, we're global in nature in every which way, from sharing knowledge, certification, and so forth. So Nick Brown, here on your screen, he did part one last Friday, and we said we'll have to do it in 2-3 parts, this presentation. So what's the presentation was about? Interoperability of the payments in the kind of the world. Now we're going to drill down further as to the risks that are posed by global wallets. And by global wallets, we're talking about Facebook, Google, Apple, whoever, the big players who are going global, and what impacts they will have. And I think I have very little doubt that I think Nick's going to wake up a few people today, right? In some of the stuff you're going to hear. And then if there's questions that you want to ask, we have a chat line or Q&A on the screen. If you're coming especially through Zoom. If you are coming through other places, you may not, you can then tweet the question into us, but regardless, what we're going to cover are some key areas. There are a couple of things I'll update you from the last webinar. So Nick, once again, and by the way, what I did tell you last time, and you got his bio, in case you didn't realize, Nick was the person who built the Visa's debit system globally. So as we always politely put it, knows a thing or two about this business. So, Nick, what we're going to talk about is the global impact. So why don't you get us started out with where the challenges you see?
Yeah, so probably the first thing to do would be to define what we're talking about when we're talking about mobile wallets. The way that I like defining it is that there's mobile money and then there's mobile wallets. And mobile money was started by Safaricom in Kenya with M-Pesa, and it was staggeringly successful. Mobile money and all the other cell phone companies are now copying them because it was just, there was such demand for the services. Mobile money is tied to your phone number. That's the distinction between mobile money and mobile wallets. With mobile money, it's tied to the phone number, and you can only transact easily with other people that also have a cell phone from the same provider. So with M-Pesa, you can only transact with other people that have an M-Pesa account. And this was started with standard cell phones, non-smartphones. And you could have these accounts. There was no need for internet access, and it worked really well. Mobile wallets, on the other hand, I'm defining those as being anyone with a smartphone can have an account, a mobile wallet account. It's a mobile app. So anyone can have an account. It removes one of the restrictions of mobile money, which is if anyone can have an account, then anyone can transact with anyone. They are still both closed systems. So that characteristic is the same with both. But we're talking about the potential here for global mobile wallets. So mobile wallets that go beyond one country or one region and actually end up becoming global in nature. And that's where I see some real risks.
Part you covered, you just explained the difference between mobile wallets, mobile money wallets, which, and as M-Pesa is correct, it is tied into the accounts. Although the initial intent was never to tie it to a bank account and so forth when M-Pesa started. But the point is very valid that it is the way it is today. Now, we have, when you look at that, we got in South America and all over the place, we got mobile payments, mobile wallets certainly in place. Of course, there's entry of our big friends, into this, Facebook and, through Calibra and Google and Apple Pay and all that. Now, it's interesting because I'm looking to define what is the difference. The banks are doing debit cards, right, which is tied to your bank account, and they have now started putting some of the apps on this as well. You can do credit and So why don't we first dwell on the differences there, and then why it causes all these challenges and risks, right?
Yes. So there's, yeah. What you have is across sub-Saharan Africa and a large part of Southeast Asia, you've got mobile money dominates. In Latin America, it's very much mobile wallets. It's like you had the internet already out to the village, and so mobile wallets was the obvious place to start, and they're extremely successful.
Right.
So the threat. So let's stop. The first like victims in a way of mobile wallets will be the mobile money systems, and that is because they're mostly still now mobile money is text based, and it works fine, but it's clunky. Whereas mobile wallets are going to be, when the internet is available, they're going to look nice, they're going to have greater reach because anyone can have an account. And basically mobile money is not going to be able to compete with that. Both systems are closed systems, and so to do a transaction with someone else is just an internal accounting transfer. So those are really cheap to do, they're really efficient, it's nice and safe because it's all contained within one system. But that starts to build up where the problems are is that, and the power of mobile wallets. I mean, there's no question that mobile wallets are a phenomenal service that's provided. It's just that there's a danger to it as well. And that's really where it comes in, because you start with mobile money can't compete. What would they have to do to compete is have a nice front end, a mobile app as a front end. And this is where what you're saying with banks, they've got to have a mobile app in order to have that level of appeal for people to use. That's the front end. The back end, you've got to have interoperability. You cannot compete with mobile wallets if you only have a closed system. And so mobile money is a closed system. You've got to have interoperability so anyone can transact with anyone else. For the banks, it's slightly different because they do have interoperability. It's just not very easy. And so there's got to be an easier version of transferring money between banks in order for the banks to be able to compete against mobile wallets.
So stick with that, because that's a very important point you just touched. Even if you take a step back from mobile payments and mobile wallets, if you were to transfer money from Canada to US, forget about everywhere else in the world, it will not happen instantaneously. You issue checks, they don't clear as fast, and there's all sorts of challenges there. So as much as the banking system is connected and they work and supposed to work well, there are challenges within Canada or within US. There may be a different story, but so that's one part. Now, with the mobile payments, like the application that they front end, and they allow you to do the same thing as you would do on your bank or internet or whatever. That's not a replacement of, that's just an add-on to the front, right? So it's a front end allowing you to, whereas mobile wallets are a whole different story. Now, why this is relevant is the Bank of Canada made an announcement yesterday. We have Interact, which is the debit system, not Visa's debit system, but the debit system that was put together umpteen years ago between the banks and peer-to-peer system to allow you to transfer by basically debit. Now, of course, competing with Visa, because Visa didn't have the debit in Canada till X number of years ago when those things changed. So now, the fact that Bank of Canada made the announcement that from going forward, the Interact transfer, which is exactly what we're talking about here, is now considered an essential system, because after the COVID-19 crisis, this has become part of the infrastructure where they've used, if any damage to that or if that system was not available, it would cause economic damage. Which, if you were in Kenya and you're dependent on M-Pesa, right, or many other places where they're starting to do that, the impact of them being taken out of the game would be pretty devastating, to put it politely, right?
Yeah.
So now where you touched is the mobile wallet. I can talk to the 2 or 3 that I was heavily involved with, the one in the Middle East, in Egypt, and South America, and you load the value onto the mobile wallet, right? And the value is there, and will go to the extent that you run out of it. Now you're out of it, right? Because now you reload that. No different than a prepaid card, but you can use it wherever, right? You can use it to pay. You could actually use it effectively to buy some thing from shop or whatever. So that being the case, now play that back on the mobile wallet side. We see the risks. What are the risks if you're able to drill down?
Yes. So you started on a very important aspect of this. So if someone wants to put money into their mobile wallet, they'll do a transfer. It's a little clunky, but money will get transferred into their account. Then they start using it. It stays in the mobile wallet. It's just transferred to the next player along the line. Now, so this is a net inflow into the mobile wallet that in all likelihood will never leave. It will stay there. It's a one-directional flow into the mobile wallet. Because what happens then? Let's say I now go and buy something. The merchant now has a mobile wallet with money in it. What are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to go to their suppliers and say, hey, I've got all this money in a mobile wallet. Why don't you take it? Why don't we transact using it as well? And it starts working its way up the supply chain. So what you have is now you're having merchants and businesses starting to see the value and the ease that mobile wallets provide, because it's an instantaneous transfer. And this is where it gets very dangerous, as from my perspective. I mean, not in its own right, because they're offering a great service, is when you get into things like international transfers. Because the international, this is what you were just saying, where like you do a transfer between the US and Canada, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. If you have an international mobile wallet, there's a huge difference between a national mobile wallet and an international one. If you have an international one, all of a sudden international transfers are instantaneous. Let's throw currency exchange in there as well, which is like the logical next step. And all of a sudden you're doing instant transfers with currency exchange. Forget individuals using it. B2B transactions. You're making it really, really easy for businesses to transact with each other across national borders, way easier than banks can do. This is the real threat to conventional banks, is that they're going to lose the deposits. And so you have the deposits being like money, like the businesses start seeing the value of this. They start taking money out and putting it into a mobile wallet account. It doesn't take much. And the banks are going to be in real trouble because they don't have all that money sitting in reserve. What are they going to do? So, I mean, this is where it gets really shaky, because this is the speculation part. There's a lot of stuff which you can look and say, yeah, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. The worry is it could cause banks to get into financial trouble, even if they're doing everything right. And that's the bit that really concerns me, because once that starts happening, then what? The banks don't have the reserves they need. What do they do about it? Is there a run on the banks? I mean, in the 30s in this country, in the US, you had a run on the banks because there was no insurance. It was called FDIC insurance in this country, which was guaranteeing people's accounts so that if there was a run on the bank, it wouldn't happen. People say, well, I'm insured by the government. I don't have to pull my money out. But you start having even the rumor of a bank in trouble, and it would cause the bank to actually go under. And people were spreading rumors in the 30s just to cause their competition to disappear. That was happening all the time. That's really worrying. And so there's like, what do you do about that? How do you prevent that from happening? Because the banks have, and this is this is a story I saw here. There was one specific aspect of conventional banking that is so important, above all others from my perspective. And what is the service that the banks offer? And that is they offer very short-term loans to businesses. So you have a business that's got payroll and it's due in 2 days, and they have receivables that's going to be 2 weeks from a guaranteed source. And the banks constantly just provide that brief loan in order to do it. Banks are not going to be able to do that. That happened in 2008, 2009 here, is companies went out of businesses because the banks stopped offering those loans, and I realized how important that was.
So this is very, very interesting. There are three things I picked up right off the bat that I will attach to. So what I'm about to say is that it's more than speculation. You're right. We are safer in calling it speculation, but three things that actually show that this thing's already happening. One is that we all know that there's a disaster in Lebanon that's happened a few days ago.
Yes.
Who wanted to transfer money, to donate money, to get in there through the banks. People in this country, and I'm sure elsewhere, went out of their way to donate money, and the government was actually helping that the money doesn't go to either the government or the Lebanese banks, because they are worried that the money will not reach the end person to whom it was really directed.
Yes.
Why? If you put your money in and you try to take the money out, what we saw in Greece is that you may have 200,000 sitting in the bank, but you can only take out 200 because of the run on money that you talked about, because you don't know what assets are there, not there. So, and when liquidity becomes a problem, it's a challenge in itself. So in short, the trust is what I'm talking about. Whether it is actually real or not, the perception is deadly if it's caused that, these guys may have a problem. Point number one. Point number two, in the reserve float that you talked about, all people have to remember is American Express travelers checks. The amount of billions of dollars that are sitting in reserves that they had in uncashed checks, travelers checks, because I was given by my aunt a few years ago in UK because she was going to, my uncle's jacket or whatever, and found $500 worth of US dollars of American Express travelers checks. God knows when he bought it, but it had to be 30 years ago, right? So she said, "You take it. I don't know what is for you." Anyway, I looked at it and they said, "Oh, it's expired." I said, "No, I'm in banking world. I'll try to be sent back. Don't worry about it." And so I did get the money, but then I started looking at how much there is. And then you remember Visa used to have the travelers checks also at one time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the float piles up because you don't use it up, right? So your point about loading the money in a wallet, it stays there, right, is very important, because you don't know the reserves. Because the question is, you better have that reserve on the other side. Because I load the money, you have a digital entry here, you better have the equivalent cash here, because that's what I just loaded, right?
Yeah.
That's a second problem. Third problem is like the frequent flyer points, that we're getting all sorts of points. Everybody went out there to cash their points and saying, I want to, buy a ticket. Do they have that number of seats to be able to cash in the points? And the answer has to be no. They can't, because they depend. So what happens here? Do you have the amount of money that you just banked and deposited into this side as being available to you? And the question is, I don't know. We are right?
But, because if the money is being moved into the wallets are not in the business of lending money.
Correct.
They're not even focused on that. That'll be a future product they'll offer.
Right.
Right now, what are they doing? They're looking to grow. They're looking to go into new markets. That's their focus. So you're going to have all this money that's just been squirreled away, and nothing is happening with it.
Correct. So now, too often we've ignored the Canada, US, or the Western countries out of this thing, and we always dealt when saying this is developing countries. And my point is not necessarily, because in the United States, the credit card business, the debit card business is a monoline business. And I can say that because I had to deal with it, right? What do I mean by that? Your credit card issuer is not your bank, is not the one who's giving you the loan. They have monolines, and the people switch credit cards and debit cards when they give them 5% interest rate for 3 months and 6 months, and everybody chases this, right? Because they're leveraged very heavily.
Yeah, we have accounts in 5 different banks now.
Correct, exactly. So now let's go to this. So that's the monoline. You are taking a massive risk. If you're in Canada or in UK, you have a different challenge, because in Canada, people have lifelong relationship with banks. You have your mortgage, you have your loans, you have this, then the other, and credit card is just one of the items, and so is your debit card. But that's not necessarily true elsewhere. So that opens up yet another challenge in terms of what this is going to do. Now, we're not talking about cryptocurrency, we're talking about digital currency, right? This is what we're talking about here. So what will happen, and then we come to the security, we can discuss. So effectively, if let's take Facebook, who at least I don't trust, right? And they've given me reason not to trust them, not because when my data is abused without my permission, and they do that all the time, and they monetize it, then the issue becomes, if they're going to be issuing a mobile wallet, right, with Calibre and whatever, why would I trust them if I didn't trust them yesterday, or for that matter, anybody else out there? So I look at it and go, who are the players that are doing it, right? And yes, you want to be able to work in this is one of the things where Visa has one of the most powerful networks in the world as a network, and it's a clearinghouse. A lot of people get confused about what Visa's role in this. We can talk about it later, but I think the issue here is, how are they helping the economies? Because if you were a country, right, and this digital currency and ignoring what is going on can undermine countries and their economies. Why? Because when you're doing this digital entries one to another, the government control their economies and through their monetary policies, right?
Yeah.
The taxation, the whole. But in here, if that is not what is happening, you're going around, and the banks and the central banks and had no role to play in that. Where's the tax? I mean, I've seen people buy software which should have actually been subjected to VAT in UK or HST here and whatever taxes, but there are no taxes were charged because it went straight outside the process. That now is a danger. So the government needs to play in this, right, to make sure that they don't lose out these revenues and know what's going on,
or at least reporting.
At least reported, because when you look at anti-money laundering, I don't care how many rules you come up with. If you are not part of this ecosystem and they're going around you, just because one of the dangers we have is because we have done something that's worked well for many years, and I'm now addressing the banks, and I came from there, as you know. The thing is, I look at it and go, hang on, we're not the greatest at keeping on top. What we talk versus what we do are two different things. So I think what has to happen is turn around and say, get into this game fast, but don't try and just replace A with B, because that doesn't work, because everything else has changed out there. So the question is, what are you giving me here now? And we can talk about the interchange, which some people don't understand, because if you're doing this mobile wallets or mobile payments, there's no interchange. There's a transaction fee, right, which is very small. And you want to undo everybody in the game, you just go down the path and just charge it. Like everybody thinks Visa makes this 2% interchange. Visa does not. It's the acquiring issuer that's making it. Visa charges only a fraction of a cent per transaction. And if they actually went down that path to being just network, I think they could take everybody apart. But because of the way it's happening, so the question is, let's talk about that. To say, we'll talk about security, but from a standpoint of the mobile wallet, you talk about reserves, right? Not
yes.
Enough money, that's a big issue. So we can drill down there further. We can address about the fact that the monetary policies of a country can be bypassed, because you could do money laundering very easily through this.
Easily. Even if there are regulations on the books that they have to report, there's no reason to think that everyone will follow those.
Correct.
It's like if you're a person or you're a business, you can open an account in a mobile wallet under someone else's name or just a random name.
Correct.
And now no one knows that it exists. It's very easy to do that. And there's not a great deal. If you have a national mobile wallet, you can put all kinds of regulations on it because it's national. When you get international, then you don't have that power to do that. The only time you have a sliver of a chance of doing something like that is when you let them in your country in the first place. And
right.
You can impose something then. The moment it's in, you can't do it. It's too late at that point. But then even then, it's limited to how much you can actually do. Because you're talking about international law now. You
right.
go to a mobile wallet that's based in a different country, because that's how they'll make sure it works. It'll always be in a different country, and how can you force them to do anything? You can't.
So let's like one at a time. We take Facebook. There's an example. I don't know how they're working inside, but I'm just asking a question.
Yes.
We know that data does not stay here. Data goes back to US, okay? Because that's where they are.
Yes.
We know we have a issue about data flying across to other places through whatever the jurisdiction might be. So you are in Africa, you are in United Kingdom, you're in Canada, wherever. The problem is that your data is sitting somewhere else. So your country, as the government, does not have control over it because you don't know what the hell's going on. The data is sitting somewhere else. So how much control you have over your own monetary policy is a very good question to start with. Because that's where it's headed if people are not careful, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
well,
yeah, go ahead.
And I'd like to jump in on this one because you did mention earlier that like Facebook doesn't have a great reputation here. Well, it does in developing countries. In a lot of developing countries, people love Facebook, and you're talking countries that don't have credit cards, so people are not aware of the risks involved in payments. And so they're going to look at Facebook, Facebook's mobile wallet, and going to go, well, of course, that's great. One example recently that's been in the payment news anyway, recently has been Facebook's WhatsApp going into Brazil, where WhatsApp already has 120 million users in Brazil. And they said, we want to do payments there. And it's like, the Brazilian government said, whoa, hold on a second. We need to think about this a little more. And good for them for doing that. It's like, slow the process, because once they're in, it's too late. So the only time you have a chance to do anything is at the point of letting them in the first place. Now WhatsApp and Facebook with WhatsApp, they are playing the game with Visa and MasterCard and saying, hey, we're going to be doing card transactions. Yeah, that's a Trojan horse.
Correct.
The moment they're in there, they already have a mobile wallet. It's called Calibra. Everyone talks about Libra as the cryptocurrency. In the same announcements, they are announcing Calibra, the mobile wallet. The mobile wallet is the one that's going to make the difference. That's the one everyone should have been talking about.
Right.
Because that's the world changer. They're looking to be one of the big 4 to 6 global mobile wallets left at the end of the day. And they've got a really good chance of doing it.
So on the Facebook,
yes,
that thing in Africa and whatever else, the truth is that the governments have used that to promote their propaganda, because we know 80-90% of the stuff is all crap, right? Because we know that's a fact. If you go in and look at the amount of phony stories or things that have no head or tail that get through on some of this social media, is mind-boggling. So
yes.
the question is, we've seen Congress hearings where they said, no, we won't do this, but we know they're doing it. So the question is, in Africa and other places where it's been used, but then I inject this another thing. In the last few days, because of the decisions that were made in the United States, Huawei in China is now creating its own chip, right? So they are saying we need 500,000 more people to do this. So they are in negotiation with 2-3 friendly countries. They're not going to give it here, right? So what is that chip going to? That chip will drive all their stuff. And you and I know that when you burn the software into that, you put the operating system in that, which is what they're talking about, right off Africa, completely out of this. No matter who, whether it's Facebook or whatever, it won't work in 2 seconds because that's where it's going. So this short-sighted thing, oh, we've got this control and this and the other, and it's short-sighted because they've done well. And when you're doing well in the corner suite, you think you're making good money, but you forget who the end person is, your customer, your employee, or whatever. So that is a danger, right? But I think back to and I didn't mean to pick on Facebook, but anybody, Facebook I'm using as just anybody or any big wallet issue.
Yes.
So whether it's Google, Apple Pay, whatever, they're going to the same camp, really.
Yeah, Alipay, WeChat Pay, Amazon Payments is another one. And there will be others as well. And there's no telling which ones will succeed, but there will be a handful that succeed at the end of the day.
Correct. And you and I know that the one out of China, Alipay, is making tremendous strides. Tremendous.
Well, they're ahead of the game in the fact that they've been running with a massive population, like WeChat Pay. They've been running with they have a proven model of it working with massive numbers. Correct. So they are the 2 companies that are ahead of the game right now.
And so we just admitted that China is in the lead there.
Yes, right now.
Right?
Facebook is playing catch up. Amazon is just getting in on the game. There are mobile wallets, and Google is playing a different game, a game that I actually like a lot better. They're not looking to own the market. They're looking to be one of many right from the beginning. So good for them.
Google.
Yes.
Google? Yes, Google's got a different approach to this, which is smart.
Yes.
I agree completely. They are the guys who are on the different part. That's where I'm saying, okay, that's interesting what they're doing. Because they don't mind playing in the international game. Because
they want to be one of many.
Yes, they want to be one of many, and they can go the franchise model, right? To turn around and say, which is what they're thinking, but it's not Facebook thought process, is that, okay, you can be Google in Kenya, the data stays there, all, and it will work with one another, right? That model would work very well because it gives control to the local people, to the government. Your data is not going anywhere. So that.
Well, Google can't play the same game because with Alipay and WeChat Pay and Amazon and Facebook, everyone already has an account that you log in to do something else. And while you're there doing something else, why not do your payments as well? You're already logged in. Google doesn't have that. They've never had that structure of you log in and then you spend a large part of your life within their system. And so they know they can't compete at the same level. They have to look at a different business model and push for that one to succeed, where everyone gets to play on the same level playing field.
You're talking about the strategic alliances we talked about many years ago. You can't be everything to everybody, so grab that guy in that country, somebody else. Yeah, absolutely. Very good model, works. But what it does, very interesting thing for the model. Now, and we have not talked about Visa here because they are a network. And they're the most powerful network in the world.
Yes.
All they have to do is turn around and say, you know what, we're making this deal and we'll play the clearinghouse, as they have done up to now. Because the misnomer or misconception out there is Visa makes the 2% or 2.5%. Visa does not. Charges a fraction of a cent. Is the banks on both sides.
The issuing bank gets the bulk of it.
The issuing bank and the acquiring bank gets a little bit.
They get some. The interchanges in between, like Visa, get a very, very small amount. Visa gets an extra piece because of the brand name.
Yeah. No, that's different. The branding of issuing a card and is a separate cost that we charge, whatever, monthly and whatever. But you're right. The transaction fee of authorization or settlement and all that is a fraction of a cent, not even a cent.
Yes.
Both know. So can you imagine you now were to convert that and hook it up where there's a bank? It doesn't matter. Any financial system that's hooked into the ACH, right?
Yes.
That has access to your account. So the question becomes monetizing. I've got this digital and I had to go back to M-Pesa. How did they do that? Banks were not involved before. They were going. Right?
Yeah.
So,
that's why can't Visa be that interoperability in developing countries? And it's a really good question because they're actually doing a lot to make that happen.
Correct.
The trouble is that depending on which country you're looking at, it will be anywhere from 3% to 25% of the population are affluent enough to justify getting a card, because there is a 10 to 20, like a 20 to 35% minimum fee on every transaction for a reason. It's there in order to be able to handle payment fraud. And for people earning $2 a day, you can't give them a card because their transactions are too small. So Visa's breaking in and doing really well. Visa and MasterCard are breaking into cities and towns, especially touristy areas, and they're making inroads, and good for them. That's exactly what they should be doing. And they're like working at the top and working down. The problem is, though, is that the mobile wallets will work at the bottom and work up. And this is, you're getting the bulk of the population, the poor people in the population, the bulk of them using it, and they're going to be pushing it through the businesses that they buy from and up the supply chain. And they're going to own that part of the market. The vast majority of people in these countries are going to be using mobile wallets. And then what are these people going to do? They're going to go to those restaurants, let's say, that can accept Visa. And they're going to say, well, we don't have a Visa card. We have this mobile wallet. So the merchants want to accept every payment method their customers want to offer them. They're going to offer all of them. They're going to accept every payment method. And so it's going to be driven by their users. And a small percentage are going to end up being cards, especially tourism. Internally, though, with the people in the country, the vast majority will end up being mobile wallets. So even though Visa and MasterCard are doing everything right, it's still not going to be enough. You need to have the rails reach the poorest people. That's an essential piece in this.
I think the rails are there. It's not that the rails are not there. Rails have been there always. It was because the banks used to own Visa. There's a lot of confusion on this issue. That banks own Visa for the longest time.
Yes.
And that was the problem, that they couldn't do it. Now the banks don't own. Visa has the ability to do it, although banks as issuer of credit card still influence some of the things, right? But as you go down this path, you're quite right. What you're talking about is unbanked. The guys who are going for the mobile wallets are the unbanked people who are really week to week pay or whatever they do, the job, they get the money and it gets loaded. If you remove this cost to a merchant of paying interchange and whatever, which is quite high, which is into billions here alone, and you now turn around, allow the merchant to keep more, and therefore they can hopefully pass the savings, which is always tough because sometimes it's not passed on. But you make it competitive, let the free market decide, because the next guy will give it to you cheaper. It enables them, certainly, you're right, everything you talked about. Then when it comes to the mobile wallet, committing fraud is not that easy. Not the type of thing I was involved with the mobile talk because of the fact you don't load thousands of dollars in a credit card to buy is 50,000, right?
Yes. For mobile wallets, preventing fraud is relatively easy because it's a closed system.
Correct.
And so they can accommodate the tiny transactions way better than the card rails can.
That's absolutely right. So now the question has to be asked in the Western countries. Developing countries can do this, like you've got people like Fowry up in Egypt who've done a bloody good job of this very thing, M-Pesa in Kenya, and you're seeing this around many other countries there. South America has done it. So the question then becomes, why are certainly in the Western countries, some of the companies, because they are hooked into this, a lot of their business comes from where it is, right? And so they're reluctant to move, but the danger is you don't move, somebody else moves. Like we were having this conversation yesterday, and I said, the dangerous game we are playing is that we don't think they can do it outside, then we will be playing by those rules.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Though they are writing the rules. We're nowhere to be seen on the thing because we continue to love that card in our wallet, but we don't realize there's a cost to producing that card there's a potential of sending it out, card getting picked up in the mail, fraud getting all thing was skimming. With a chip, we were able to reduce that, but there's still fraud happening, right? A lot of fraud happening. It's not gone down. It's just,
Yeah.
no, people need to forget this idea in their head that crooks are going to give up. They don't give up. They're going to get better and better each day, right?
Yeah, they're always looking for the latest opportunity, the latest hole in the system, or even creating them if they can.
So now, if we were to compare the card and global wallets, like we're saying, this posing a lot of risk. So one of the risks you identified is, in fact, the sovereignty of the country, right? The
Yes.
monetary policies, right? Correct. We agree that that's a big challenge, right?
Yes.
Isn't the second one the fraud that we're talking about, right? Which is massive today, and every dollar that the banks write off here, we know for a fact, not anecdotally. Now I haven't done it for a few years, but it was $10 of cost. So the cost is very high, but because we are in a culture of we know what to do, but we don't know why we're doing it, we don't realize the problem, right? So we keep doing the same thing each year.
There's no incentive to change.
Correct. There's zero.
It's fairly predictable, and people in this country, in this part of the world, are affluent enough so that the actual cost of fraud is at a low enough level to be manageable.
I wouldn't even say low. You're right. I would not say they've made it a cost of doing business.
Yes, it's built into it. It's was it an average of say 2.5% applied to the merchant?
And although the intent was to cover the cost, it was never intended for that because they charge very high percentage of interest because of revolving, payments, because people don't pay their bills on time. We know that. A significant portion does not pay their bill, and that's who's funding everybody else. But now, if you were to change this, the reason they got so much tied into this model, that they need to think about where the revenue is going to come from, right? But now we are going back right to the financial system, whether it's here, US, UK, whatever. If that's what you're relying on, you're asking for trouble. Right?
Well, yes. And I want to jump in on this one. By assuming that we in the West are leading the world in this and we're ahead, we are not seeing this threat, because although because I'm focused on developing countries, I'm looking at what's happening there and the threats that are there. That's where the rest of the world is developing countries that are leading in this industry now, as far as innovating in it. And if we are sitting over here and we just are ignoring it, thinking we're ahead, we're going to wake up one day and go, what happened?
Correct.
As new systems come in, they will come into this country from Africa, from Southeast Asia or Latin America. And they're going to come in, and all of a sudden we're going to notice that industry has been changed and we weren't prepared for it.
I was shocked here at some people on the internet not that long ago, a few months ago, but they were not using Google, they were using WeChat.
Yep.
Right? And so he said to me, this is the safest way, you should use this. And I go, really? And so they're starting to do that because the risk to them, in his view, which is, you can't argue with that, he's saying, well, this guy's going to grab my information, Facebook is going to do it, Google is going to do it. We know there's significant investment in Silicon Valley by the intelligence agencies in the US. Significant. So he said, so if they're doing this and the other guys are doing it, as long as I can get what I need to do, right, I'm safe. And so that was and I thought to myself, how do I argue with this guy, right? But I'm hearing the same thing out in the other countries. And so the danger there is, you're right, people are asleep because they're only worried about shareholder value and they're making money right now, right? Even after COVID-19 has changed the world upside down, you go out there and people are saying, when things get back to normal, and I'm saying, which normal?
Yes.
Which normal are you talking about, right? And you can see there's a group, very smart, saying, hey, things have changed. I better jump in ahead and I will be safe. And the others who are just pushing the same old stuff, and they just want to give it a new name. That's all.
Yes. And this is where, if you're relatively comfortable, you don't look out for the dangers because you're okay at the moment. And it's so the people, I'll tell you what's so amazing is that we're all running, and here in the West, we're all running around with our hair on fire right now. And yet we're actually in a relatively better situation than a lot of developing countries. Because we have a lot more of an established medical infrastructure to cope with this virus. However, it's developing countries, they're already planning for the future. And I'm so amazed by the fact that they're doing that. It's like, that's amazing to me. It's like your house is burning down as everyone else's is. And yet you're saying, hey, look, the next time this happens, we need to be prepared. Whoa, I am so impressed by that. But I wanted to come back to,
yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to come back to one thing on this. It's like the global mobile wallets, they don't see conventional banks or regional mobile wallets potentially are competitors to them. Mobile money is not a competitor, conventional banks aren't. They're looking at the world and they are carving it out. They're between them. The whole move of Facebook into Africa with WhatsApp payments is a matter of trying to get into Brazil before Alipay does, for example. I mean, again, it's like, it may or may not be the same names at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, they look at this and say, there are gonna be like 4 to 6 global mobile wallets, and all the businesses will have an account with each, and people will have an account with 1 or 2. But everyone can then transact with everyone else really, really efficiently. So you, first of all, what we've already mentioned, you have the destruction within countries. You've got destruction of the banks. You've got destruction of central banking loses control. The governments lose control. There's another thing we haven't mentioned though, and that is that, which I look at and it absolutely horrifies me, because this, to me, this is almost worse. Oh, I'm not sure that relatively I'd be accurate on that, but I look at this and say, let's say you're a merchant and you've got a new product you want to sell. If the only way you can sell it is through these mobile wallets, then there are 4 to 6 people who are the gateways to everything. And you have to get approval to sell your product to anyone. That to me is scary. This is the biggest, it's like, that is a future where you have 4 to 6 people deciding what happens. That is not good. That's like, I like the internet model. Everyone gets to play. With this model, no, there are maybe 6 people that can decide what products you can sell, who you can sell them to. That is a horrendous future to picture.
Dangerous.
Because normally I would say, hey, if you offer a faster, better, cheaper, cooler product, then you should win. Not this time. Sorry. We need to find a way to, not to get to stop them from offering the services they have, but to make it so that everyone else gets to play as well. I want the banks to play, to be part of the final equation. I want the mobile money guys to. I want governments and central banks and regulators to be able to decide what happens in each of their countries and not be forced into things from huge global companies that are not going to be subject to anything because they're running on international law at this point, which is almost non-existent.
So let's take that global wallet in the banking relationship, since we have said we're talking about dangers, the risks and all that.
Yes.
We have potentially a currency that is being printed every day.
Yeah.
We don't have to look further. So what's going on? Trillions of dollars are being printed with nothing to back it. Zero to back it, right? And
yes.
We don't have a problem. But you got a country that's been buying up all the gold, right? He's actually going down this path also with mobile payments, like as we talked about. What happens if they were to turn around and say, by the way, we're not a bank, right? But we got reserve currency here, gold, right? And we're going to back this. Now what happens?
Well, you talk about what happens if you end up introducing global currency.
Correct.
Libra, there's an example. Facebook has already mentioned that they want to. China China came up with, what was it? I was asked a question just a couple of days ago. Like, what about their new currency? It's called the DCEP. I've got it written up on the board.
They just,
and it's like, which can be available through a wallet. Well, and it's tied to the yuan. So like, what effect is that going to have? If you've got these global mobile wallets, it's going to make it easy for companies to choose to switch over to a global currency. So now the currencies, national currencies, are in real trouble because it's going to mean that there's no currency fluctuation for international transactions. So and then what they can do is, if you have to use the mobile wallets, after a while they can force you to move over onto it. They can just switch everyone's currency to theirs, and that's it. They have the power to do that. Now, it doesn't mean they will. They could, though. And that's the risky part. But a lot of businesses will choose to use a global currency, especially if it's fairly stable compared with their national currency. They'll choose to use it because it makes international trade so much easier. And again, there's nothing wrong with having easier trade. Not this way, though.
What you touched is a very interesting area. And we're not talking about politics. But any isolationist type policies is dangerous for this type of thing, because the other guys get together, as you can see it happening.
Yes.
We know it's having will have an impact on US dollar. It's a matter of time, as all the experts are quite rightly pointing out, is that if they start to deal with this digital currency, we know this recent deal with Iran and China and some of the stuff they've done in Africa is not dealing in US dollars. So you're already not playing in that. So if you now go take one step further with this digital currency, right, which is neutral, if you want to call it that, then what happens is, so if you're a government, you have to be paying very serious attention to this, right? Number one. If you're a bank, you better take a very serious look at what is going on here. Now, I know one bank in particular, because the project I was involved with, is actually ahead of the game on that they have lot invested in other countries, right? They are part of that. So they will be fine if they had to go and transfer. The question is now, they'll to rethink, as John Ruffle rightly points out, you have to rethink and reimagine the business, right? About what is the business that I can make money. So it's not that you're dead. You just have to redo different things and play in a different game, because the game's changed. Because if people are working from home, that is changing. People can buy, just like you're buying from through Amazon and they deliver. What happens if Amazon tomorrow turns down because of power? I'm going to your point you raised. Amazon turns around and says, by the way, supplier A, B, and C, I'm not going to carry your product. I'm going to carry your competition's product because they're giving me more commission. They're doing this and the other. Can they do that? The answer is yes. Will they do that? Well, your guess is as good as mine, because it's all about money. So the question becomes that, are we not creating that environment, as you have quite rightly alluded, that, you know, we are wiping out the level playing field in this approach, right?
Yes.
And we're deciding who the winners and losers are, which is not.
We're letting them happen. We're not even deciding.
We're letting it happen. Yes. So if you're now going to do global wallets, right? What you are saying is, country, be careful. You keep control, which means the Bank of Canada and U.S. Treasury and Bank of England and will turn around and say, Central Bank of Kenya, Central Bank of Egypt, wherever you are, you turn around and saying, by the way, no transaction will happen under my watch unless I sign off, meaning there are rules to follow. Just like they did with Interact yesterday, is you can see that they took it out of the hands of the banks yesterday.
Yeah.
To say this is no longer, this is essentially very smart thing to turn and say, no, you're not doing it, because Interact suddenly after the COVID-19 picked up. But in the case of Interact, you don't, even if you have a card, it's debit, but you could do it from your phone, you could do it from whatever, because it's cash. Don't have the money, you can't. There's no borrowing, right? Although fraud happens there too, because of the money is in your bank account. In this instance, we said that you load whatever, but you could have 15, 20 players, including grocery stores, saying, you know what, we're not going to deal with the banks. you have this digital value. You go to the grocery shop, you go to Walmart or Tesco or whatever, and use it. We'll accept that.
Yes.
They can use it again to buy services. And these guys are big enough to do that. And remember,
They are.
Very big.
Yeah. So we said that we were going to have solutions on this.
Right. So go ahead.
How do you compete against that? Because so that's a really depressing future we're painting here. Very destructive for countries, very destructive for the ability to be a merchant even. What's the alternative? The alternative future is one where, as you just said, like everyone gets to play on a level playing field. So how do you do that? And first and foremost, you've got to have a nice front end. Like people have to have a reason to switch to the mobile wallets. So don't give them the reason to switch. So you've got to have a really nice front end, nice mobile app for conventional banks as well as for mobile money. Mobile wallets already have that for the regional mobile wallets or the national ones. The next thing is that when you've got to build financial infrastructure in countries. You've really got to focus. Countries have to really start focusing on that. And what's important is it's got to get out to the poorest people. Otherwise, they're just going to go into mobile wallets, and that's going to start the shift. So it has to reach the village, as I like to put it. And that's where I have a part to play in that part. Not the whole of infrastructure, but that interoperability out to the village. You go beyond that, what else can be done? Because the reality is that unless you're like one of a handful of countries, like you've got China or the US or Europe as a whole, you really can't keep these mobile wallets out because businesses will just choose to start using them. And it's going to be very difficult to do that. So what you do is you want to standardize regulations across countries so that everyone gets to play on the same playing field. At least you put the level playing field from regulations. And you want to streamline currency exchange so that the existing infrastructure can work a bit better and streamline the existing infrastructure across borders as well. I would then say that one of the things is like there's one point where you have a little say over the global wallets, and that's when you first let them into your country. And there's a chance there to force them to do something, couple of things. One could be regulations about reporting. So if I was a government, I'd say, or a central bank, I'd say, you've got to report all the transactions relating to people and companies in our country. You've got to report to us about their accounts. Again, it's going to be difficult to enforce that, but at least you're setting up the expectation. I would do one other thing as well. I would insist that they interoperate with, they do the same streamlined interoperable system connecting internally into your country. If you make it easy, now it may sound contradictory, but make it easy for people to move money into the mobile wallet and out of it. So that if it's a clunky process to get it in, they're never going to leave. Whereas if you make it easy to move in, it's also easy to move out. And now there's that free flow. You're creating more of a level playing field in which the global mobile wallets have a part to play in as well as one of many. So I would say, no, you've got to make it easy to actually send money to their system so that it's then easy to take money out. And it now makes it, if I've got money in a mobile wallet, oh, I need to put it into my bank account, I can just transfer it and it's done. It's not stuck there.
You're talking about like serious type model, right? Where it doesn't matter who you would exchange. This I'm talking about where Visa, MasterCard, and the other people's transactions go right across, no problem. You don't have to have 10 to 20 terminals. You don't have to 20 phones. It's standard.
Yes, because then now you can use, if you can get a streamlined financial infrastructure across multiple levels, because there are multiple levels of infrastructure. Authorization is one layer that I happen to be an expert in, and you are as well. However, you've also got the funds transfer layer. You've got the currency, like the clearing houses. You've got the like currency exchange. There's a lot of different aspects to that. Streamline all of that. That's the only way that you're going to combat the dominance of global wallets and into a manner where everyone's now playing on the same field. That's the only way that I see of that.
If the banks were smart, and you just actually provided a very good solution, and they went down this path of exactly creating this, what we're talking about, but using the existing Visa network, MasterCard network, whatever, because it's global,
Yes.
and creating a separate business on site, and then using the feed from your banks where your accounts are to this wallet, right? Which is funded. So you can't do the fraud because you only do so much, and it's a closed system, as we have already discussed. So you can't play games there. You have all sorts of authentication going on because we know who owns that SIM card and the phone and where they are, location, all those things, right? So you can't play games because you'll get caught in 2 seconds. So, and even if you did, you are in the closed environment. So we can reverse that very easily.
Yes.
Right? So if you're a bank, you do that and you go with Visa, whatever is your preference, and suddenly, or you do both, obviously, you suddenly you can now play in this game. There is no way on earth either the Facebook or anybody else can fight that or compete with this.
Well, they can offer an alternative service that integrates into it. That's the key. They will get customers because they offer a great service. They should, but they're not killing off everybody else in the process.
Right.
That's the important part of it. And they get to use the same rails, whether it's the rails I'm building or whether it's the Visa, MasterCard, the card rails. Those that work at different levels of the economy.
No, so I'm saying the rails you have built and the fact any of this will use feeds into the Visa network to go do the communication. I'm not talking about interchange, right? I'm talking about using that system, the fraction of a cent, whatever transaction is happening, those will happen regardless. So you're paying, there's a lot of volume, whether you are in the new Nyeri in Kenya or where you're in some outskirts in Brazil or wherever you are, anywhere in the world, doesn't matter. You're doing this thing, but the regulatory affairs has already been dealt with for many years for Visa and MasterCard to turn on and say that, okay, here's the anti-money laundering, PetroTech, we have done all those things. So you turn around and saying, we have those risk management and security processes aligned. This becomes very powerful if you use those rails.
Yes.
Go there, right?
Well, and it's worked. It's built up. It's built up over decades.
Correct.
And the regulations have been refined over those decades as well. So they're really good regulations to go global.
Absolutely.
They aren't yet. However, they can be. And part of it is, like as I said, there are different rails out there doing different things. Make them all connect together as well. Because now that it's seamless connecting together, now everyone gets to be a part of the bigger picture. That's really, it's like, if that's not there, it leaves room for the global wallets to basically dominate and kill everybody else that's in the system, that's in the current system.
Although we've gone slightly over, I think
Gone over, yes.
We will see it through because we'll extend that, excuse me, 10 minutes. Just to finish off this, because we are in a very interesting area. There is another dispute resolution mechanism that is difficult for the likes of, again, Facebook or whoever else, but Visa has that.
Yes.
You paid service that didn't get provided, and so you complain, and it can be reversed because in a closed loop system, you can do that. And the other guys can't.
Yeah, and that actually leads into, it's like, how do you stop people moving everything over to the global wallets? By offering more than they do and that they can do. And that's where you get into all of the services that revolve around a purchase. The mobile wallets do funds transfers. Okay, it gets from A to B and it works really well. Great. Why do you need to have a purchase? Why is that so difficult? Why is that so important? Is not when you do a face-to-face transaction, because the person's there. It's just like using cash. It's when you buy something remotely on your phone and you get it delivered, cash on delivery maybe, and then you get home and it doesn't work. What do you do? So it's the whole process of a purchase guarantee and dispute resolution.
Right.
And that's the infrastructure that's being built that you're referring to
Yes,
in the
absolutely.
credit card systems.
Correct.
That's already there. Those are things that the mobile wallets cannot do.
They cannot.
They could eventually, but that's not part of their business model, maybe for another 10, 20 years.
And that the danger here is those
Yeah.
guys who are jumping in, and when the other people realize that they can go abuse this, and they will, then you have a problem. Or if a merchant decides to charge you, because not everybody out there is a saint, right? So they will charge you some money for transactions you didn't do, right? Now what happens? What is the mechanism to do that? So
Yes.
unless the Facebooks of the world are saying, oh no, we are just into money transfer, we're doing the what is it, the money transfer, Western Union business, right? What we do, then you're in a dangerous game because everybody's out there doing that already. So the question is, it's got to be, and I think this requires some people to very quickly. If I was in a bank right now, I would be holding my people in saying, I want a solution. I actually created a flow chart. First, I said I would put it up here, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to give the business away to people. But that's what it is that they need to really seriously think about this and saying, how do we play in this and still keep your business? You offer an additional service, right?
You got to offer more, and this is like this whole thing of interoperability is incredibly dangerous, and it's incredibly important. That's like the key piece in this. But it's more than just interoperability. It's interoperability plus all the functionality around what a purchase is when it comes to guarantees and dispute resolution. And that's where both you and I both have that depth of experience in building those systems.
Correct.
And so it's like, if you're doing this, make sure you include people. And there are other people that can do it as well. Make sure you get people involved that actually really understand this, because this is not a problem that's going to happen at some time in the future and you can then deal with it then. No, this is now. This is happening now. This is an imminent risk of these systems taking over everything, because they are starting to go global. They're going from their national to global. It's happening now. And it's like, be prepared for this.
Correct.
Start now on working against it as an alternative. But you can't fight it. You have to change the story.
Correct. And I don't think that's happening. I think either people underestimate it, don't believe it, or sidetrack so badly that they're not viewing this. And there's a second part to this, which is from the security side, is what the crooks have done in the last little while. They were doing it for a few years, but now they've done a very good job. Is we've always kind of felt the comfort that, the transaction is encrypted, so PCI, you're good. Here's the problem. The crooks have learned how to encrypt also to bypass your firewalls and all the other stuff. So when the bad things, and you've got really bad software in there, and you want to kind of do the damage, you build it in there and you encrypt it. You encrypt it same way as you did the other ones. Now it will bypass your systems because you need to decrypt it to see if it's good or bad, and you can't do it.
Yes, it's an entire. I mean, this has been a sort of a warfare that's been going on for 50, 60 years, and we're really good, and they're really good. It's like they are incredibly good at this.
They're better than us.
Better than us. We are very much, we are followers in this. Like when they do something, we find a way of stopping it, at which point they're already on to what's next.
Correct.
But we do keep it manageable level. So one of the things, I mean, because we are over, one of the things is that I am sure we're going to be getting a lot of questions from this, because again, this is surface level conversation. We're just delving into a risk that's out there. There are going to be a lot of questions, and I think that was the intention of one next week, is to answer a lot of these questions that we're going to get.
The actual risk of technology.
And very specific, like what are people asking? Because it's like, we can answer those questions next week and delve into some of that next week.
So folks, if you're watching this, listening to this live, please send in your questions to info@biztek.org, biztek.org, and we can have Nick address, because what you heard today, what his part, is some benefits of the global wallets, but a hell of a lot of dangers to the country, to the banks, to the monetary system, and also of locking people out of this, which is not good. So we drilled down, we talked about potential challenges around many other things where, Nick has identified, and best thing for banks right now is take a step back and realize that I better control my destiny rather than somebody else doing, right? So,
well, there's another part. Everything that we have said about what is going to happen, with the potential exception of collapsing banks, that's like a certainty. The solution, it's all there. It's a matter of, is there a willpower to do it? It's not a matter of can it be done. It's a matter of, is there a willpower to do it? Because the technology is there to do all of this.
yeah.
So it's there. It's just like, is this something you want to do or not? And if you don't, 5 years down the road, it's going to be too late.
Yeah.
It's like it's already past the point of stopping it from happening.
Correct. So what you're saying is, wake up, guys. This is not tomorrow.
So ask questions now.
Right.
Figure it out now. The risk of it happening, even if you see it as being a 50-50 or a 20%, it doesn't matter. That is a staggeringly dangerous and destructive consequence. Even just if you see this as a potential, you need to be addressing this.
Correct. I think it's fantastic. So, folks, I apologize. We went over. But
yes, we went over.
But this subject is very, very interesting. It's happening real time. There are dangers. We didn't dive into the encryption part. But I think next week, rather than get into too much of question answer, maybe what we'll do that at the end. We'll let Nick go through, right, to talk about here the issues that you've seen.
Yes.
And then we'll pick it up the last 10 minutes or so to ask questions, or if there are questions that are asked before, and we can pose them before, and so you can include them in the. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll make it interesting and worth your while, because these are all thought-provoking discussions of where the heck it's going. And if somebody's worried because you're in the bank, so you're dealing with this business, you should be worried, because and worrying is not the answer. You have to do something about it, right? And the question is, what is that you're going to do? That's what you need to think through. So,
and that's what we're here for, is to help, be a guide for you in how to find the future that you want, as opposed to the one that will land on you. Exactly.
And Nick is in California, so now it's getting to your lunchtime.
It is, yes. All right. Thank you, Bashir. This was fun.
Appreciate it. Fantastic. Look forward to Friday, 2 p.m. I'll put the link out there sooner this time, so we can actually address that. And I will post it for those who missed it. I'll post it on our website, later today, so people have got it. As always, fantastic. Well done, Nick. Some good stuff there. Have a wonderful weekend.